Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, from wherever you find yourself today. Just thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jennifer Gibson. I direct the Joint Center for Bioethics at the University of Toronto. I'm also an associate professor in the Dalla Lana School of Public Health, and I have the privilege to be the director of the MHSc program in bioethics. I'm joined today by Mr. Terry Ewan, who is the program assistant for the MHSc and Bioethics program. This is the last of 3 info sessions that we've hosted this fall. And this time around, we are going to be recording the session in order to be able to make it available to others to be able to view who are unable to join us today. A few other housekeeping items that I would like to touch on. First of all, if you would like to use closed captions, please refer to the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen to turn the captions on. As I noted, today's session is going to be recorded and will be posted on the MHSc and Bioethics program page of the Joint Center for Bioethics. The posted recording will only capture my slides, my voice, and my visual image. During the Q&A portion of today's information session, I'm going to ask you to please use the chat function, and Terry will monitor the chat and read out your questions. In doing so, you will not be identified by name and your visual image will not be posted. For those who may have additional questions at the end of today's session, not to worry, we will leave a contact information at the end so that you could reach out to us with any questions that come up but that haven't been answered after today's info session. So thank you all for joining, and let's get started. So what I'd like to cover with you today is an introduction, is an overview of the MHSc program in bioethics, but I'd like to also orient you a little bit further to other educational opportunities within the Dalla Lana School in the context of bioethics. And to really get our juices flowing, I'm going to invite us to pause to think about bioethics today. So bioethics, I would argue, has never been more relevant than it is today. And I've been in the field for close on 25 years. And there's always something urgent that is pushing and stretching and challenging us to bring an ethics lens to the work that's being done. Nevertheless, though, there seems to be coalescence once more about the need for a fresh look at what it means to engage in our professional work as scholars or as working professionals in the field, to engage in an ethical way, and also to bring awareness to the complex challenges that our health systems and civil societies are increasingly facing, whether that's in health policy or in health care or in public health, health research practice, or the convergence of these. And indeed, there are many other societal challenges that you and I and our communities and the populations in the countries in which we live are contending with, that go beyond the boundaries of health institutions or public health conventionally, but are so essential for ensuring the public's health. So it's an interesting time to be, as a director of a bioethics center, to be in that, to be at a center for bioethics, but also I'm imagining for you too, it must be an interesting time. What is calling you here today must be some of these complex challenges or even perennial challenges you may face in your professional practice. And so often these challenges that we see around us are fundamentally, are at their core, ethical challenges that can't be resolved simply by appeal to legal or regulatory requirements, although those may be relevant, by appeal to more data, although empirically grounding our responses is important, or by appeal to technical solutions alone. In health institutions and systems of today, and I would argue tomorrow, the ability to anticipate, to recognize, to assess, and to address ethical issues in practice has become an essential professional competency. So I'm curious for you to share a few notes in the chat. Think of this a little interactive about some of the ethical issues that are keeping you up at night. What do you see as some of the ethical issues that are most pressing today and for the future? Let's just take a moment to jot down a few examples into the chat box so that others can have a sense on today's call about what's coming up for them in their own spheres of professional life. Some of the ones that are keeping me up at night these days are the intersection of artificial intelligence and health research, public health, health policy, and so on, and developing governance systems, ethical governance systems to support a responsible approach to use of AI. I'm also worrying a bit about what bioethicist role may now be in terms of ensuring that we have equitable and sustainable societies that recognizes that we have vast inequalities within our society, disproportionately affecting some members of our society compared to others. And these effects have health impacts. So at the beginning, I'm worrying about that. And the COVID pandemic certainly revealed that. Another one that's keeping me up at night is how there may be a convergence of crises that we may be grappling with. And this became very real to me a couple of summers ago when I was in British Columbia, which is where some of my family lives, during the summertime. And at that time, we were still in the COVID-19 pandemic. There were forest fires, so the air was not healthy to breathe. There was at that time, because there was what was called an atmospheric wave that was threatening to hit Vancouver Island on the west coast. It was also a time when there was flooding in the province of British Columbia, and at the same time, an epidemic of opioid use converging all at the same time. And what struck me was, wow, these are the challenges that I'm being called now to turn my mind to, an ethics of wicked problems that affect people in so many profound ways. So how are we seeking to tackle this at the Dalla Lana School of Public Health? At the University of Toronto, the Dalla Lana School of Public Health is home to 2 graduate education initiatives in bioethics. The MHSc Master Health Science and Bioethics program is a professional master's degree program for working professionals in health and health-related settings and institutions. The collaborative specialization in bioethics is an interdisciplinary research specialization in bioethics for graduate students enrolled at the University of Toronto already in a master's or a doctoral degree program. So, for example, a student in the collaborative specialization in bioethics might be enrolled as a PhD student in public health sciences or philosophy or nursing, and their doctoral research may be focusing on a bioethics topic. Similarly, a Master of Arts or a Master of Laws student might focus their master's thesis on a bioethics topic. Both of these educational initiatives are facilitated by the University of Toronto Joint Centre for Bioethics, Terry's in my home base. But sometimes we are asked, so which of these pathways is the right one for me? And so we've created this graphic to help parse that out. So if your primary interest is in bioethics practice, and if you are a practicing health or health-related professional, then the Master of Health Science and Bioethics is designed with you in mind. If your primary interest is in bioethics research, and you hold an undergraduate degree from any number of different university disciplines in the arts and sciences, or the humanities, or the health and social sciences, then you may wish to consider applying for a master's or a doctoral degree program at the University of Toronto and doing a specialization in bioethics. In today's information session, we're going to be focusing on the Master of Health Science in bioethics, but also want to draw your attention to those who may have an interest in pursuing bioethics research, we also have information on the Joint Center for Bioethics website about that program, and would be happy to entertain your questions about that program. So, the MHSc program in bioethics. So, what is it? Well, it's a 2-year professional master's program, as I've noted, for working health and health-related professionals who are doing what? They're seeking to develop core knowledge and skills, ideally to strengthen bioethics capacity in their institutional and professional setting. And I'll tell you a little bit more about our current cohort of MHSc students to give you a sense of who this program has in mind. The program aims to provide learners with an interprofessional education in the theory and practice of bioethics, to provide learners with opportunities to apply their bioethics knowledge and skills in health settings, and ultimately to foster the development of attributes, attitudes, and interpersonal skills suitable for individuals engaging in bioethics activities in their professional contexts. We have just recently redesigned the MHSc program in bioethics. It was initially started in the late 1990s and early 2000. And at that time, it had a focus on the professional learner as well. But I think we've learned a great deal since that time. Our health systems have evolved. We actually now have digital tools that enable us to connect like we are today across space and time. We also are starting to see that some of the literature on professional learning and good professional learning modalities has evolved as well. And so one of the things that we started to notice in our program was that increasingly our students and our learners were coming primarily from Southern Ontario. But when we had canvassed our graduates, one of the things they especially appreciated was to be able to learn from other students working in other settings, yes, but other provinces and potentially other countries as well. That there was an opportunity to learn from each other's local experiences and to bring that local experience into the classroom. So with some of these insights in mind, we redesigned the MHSc program. So what does that actually mean, that we've redesigned it with the professional learner in mind? First of all, it is now what's called a hybrid program. Originally, the course was entirely conducted in person in 2-day blocks every 2 weeks. Now the program has got both online and in-person components. Courses are conducted synchronously online, and there is some asynchronous elements to them as well. And there are in-person 5-day residency weeks and in each of 5 terms. What this means is that students can actually continue in their professional roles at a distance, but are able to then nevertheless engage with each other synchronously, so getting to know each other as a cohort, and then come together for in-person learning, really where we're focusing on the practice of bioethics, really getting our hands dirty together and really fostering some of the skill development that is so important for bioethics work during these residency weeks. The program comprises foundational learning through both required and elective coursework. The courses are foundational in the sense that they provide a shared foundation amongst students in the cohort for bioethics inquiry, and the elective coursework is one way in which students can tailor their learning around their unique bioethics interests and learning goals. There are other ways in which students can tailor their learning, and that is through a practicum experience where students get to be immersed within a bioethics context, could be one in your own institution, and engage in some observational learning to see how do bioethicists put into bioethics knowledge into practice. But it's also an opportunity to tailor your learning around the completion of a capstone project on an applied bioethics topic of interest to you, under supervision of an MHSc faculty member, and with peer feedback from the other members of the cohort itself, really taking advantage of the insight and the experience and the expertise of your colleagues in the cohort itself. All of our faculty members have actually worked in the world of translating bioethics knowledge into practice, so they bring their own real-world bioethics experience into the classroom as well. And in fact, it is what I often like to describe as what we are doing in class online or in person during residency weeks is working together, faculty and learners, to create a learning space where we can all learn, and that includes faculty members as well. So part of our pedagogical commitment is a commitment to applying adult education principles based in action learning and professional inquiry, and a strength-based commitment to inclusive anti-oppressive pedagogical practice, so that every learner knows that this is a safe learning space that we can develop and grow in. And finally, you've heard me refer to cohort a few times. The program is also designed around a cohort model to facilitate peer-to-peer learning across professional and institutional settings. One of the things that we have learned from our students and our learners over the many years is how much those relationships within the cohort matter. And some of these relationships don't just end when the degree ends, but have continued over time. Our learners have shared with us that they've really appreciated the diversity of the students within the program who bring their experience and expertise. They've shared with us that how much they value and benefit from the contextual, the personal and professional insights of their classmates from diverse professional settings, different health sectors, settings and roles, and other health systems, as I've noted, in Canada and beyond. The program requirements are shown on this slide. In graduate school or university speak, the program requires 7 full course equivalents. Basically, that is a measure of the amount of effort that students must participate in. So this includes hybrid coursework. Now, you heard the word hybrid a few moments ago in relation to the program being designed with both online and in-person elements. The required coursework is also provided in a hybrid format. That is, that students take a portion of their coursework during those residency weeks, and then they are online for the remainder of that course. And it is synchronous. So across space and time, there's that opportunity for the cohort to come together to do some shared learning with each other. The elective courses will have some in-person element to the extent that's possible, but will be mostly conducted online. So roughly 3 full course equivalents of required courses, and then here's where the tailoring happens, 2 full course equivalents as electives. The practicum, it involves a 48-hour experiential learning activity in a bioethics practice environment. And then the capstone project is an independent project on a topic of your choosing under appropriate supervision. Now, I want to say a little bit more about these residency weeks. These are required elements of the program. And so the duration of them is 5 days. They're held on the University of Toronto campus in each academic term. So fall, winter, and spring term, and then fall and winter in the second year as well. So here's a typical pathway. So you can see on this graphic, we've got 2 years of the program. You can see how in each session, fall, winter, summer, fall and winter, there is a residency week. This year, we're holding the fall residency week. We had it in September. We're holding it in January. There will be another one in May. And then in the second year, we move the cadence a little bit, and so it's October and March. Most of the required coursework is conducted in the first 2 terms of the first year. That's that foundational learning that then provides a platform for more advanced work and more focused work in elective courses. Those first two terms of coursework provides a foundation for the practicum experience, now observing how what was done in the classroom and now is being enacted in the world, and bringing that ethics lens to it that you've been cultivating over the previous two terms. And also you can see on this graphic as well that the capstone project also is something which is there's time protected for it in the second year. So there's a progression from more theory-focused work towards more practice work, more classroom work to more engaged work, such that by the end of the 2 years, you will not only have developed and cultivated some knowledge in bioethics, you will have cultivated some skills, and you've had an opportunity to practice some of those skills in your with appropriate mentorship and supervision. And at the end, you will also have had the opportunity to discover, to define, to develop, and to deliver a capstone project that ideally would be something that you translate right into your work context. And indeed, most students actually find a capstone project that is located within their own institutional setting. So it aligns up really nicely with what their professional scope of work is, and their coursework or their degree work lines up really nicely with the professional work they're doing in their own setting. The admission requirements are noted here. So applicants are admitted under the general requirements of the School of Graduate Studies at the University of Toronto, and must also satisfy these three minimum admission requirements for the MHSc program. Applicants should have an appropriate undergraduate degree with a minimum B+ average in the final year. And normally they would also have a recognized professional degree in one of the health disciplines or an equivalent. So some of the health disciplines are listed here. Applicants from other disciplines will be considered on an individual basis. So for example, we've had journalists come through the program. We've had patient and family advisors come through the program. We've also had people whose primary area of professional work was in working with families on estate planning. We've also had individuals who are working in industry, focusing on clinical research in that particular setting. So we have a really interesting mix of professional degrees or professional preparation that is relevant to health. And so on a case-by-case basis, we are always open to hearing from you about how you're seeing bioethics fit within your own environment. But I keep noting this about your professional experience. And so the additional minimum admission requirement is that applicants should have at least 3 years full-time relevant professional experience. We do look at applicants who have less experience, and these may be considered on a case-by-case basis in exceptional circumstances. So sometimes it's the combination of life experience and the professional experience that may actually not have proceeded linearly, that we look at applicants as a whole in all of your dimensions. But these are 3 really important admission requirements to keep in mind. Ideally, in addition to applicants who meet these admission requirements, we're also really interested to hear, to have applicants who have demonstrated a scholarly ability. This is an academically rigorous program. And so something that demonstrates that you have you are likely to be successful in a graduate program is really important to us. But we're also looking for personal maturity. Bioethics is hard, and some of the topics we're going to be grappling with are going to be tough. And some of the reasons why you may be approaching an MHSc program in bioethics is because you know that. So professional and personal maturity. And because this is bioethics, I like to describe as a team sport. This is really, we're looking for folks who are committed to shared inquiry, collaboration, and mutual respect to really foster the co-creation of this shared learning environment. Ideally, an applicant too will have strong support from your employer, the institution or the professional practice where you find yourself, in order for you to be able to participate actively in the degree. I'll say more about that in a moment. And then also looking for individuals who have the potential to make a significant bioethics, have a significant impact, or to demonstrate bioethics leadership upon completion of the degree. So how to apply? So there were a couple of pieces here. First, let me just flag that the application deadline is January 17th, 2025. And the application, so that gives you a little over a month, which is lots of time. The application requires, first of all, completing a School of Graduate Studies. That's what SGS means. Online admission application form. Provides you a little bit of biographical information, the degrees that you've taken, and a little bit more about you. But then also it asks you to identify 3 referees, at least one of whom should be an academic reference. The other should be a professional reference. And for the third, it could be one or the other. And to provide an institutional email address for that person, because once that information is loaded into the system, your referee will receive an invitation to complete a reference for you online. But where the magic happens is here, when we would upload and attach your current curriculum vitae. And so here is where I'm always so curious to look at applications and say, so where has this person been? What have they been doing? What is the professional work experience that they can bring into, or the life experience they can bring into the classroom, into the cohort? A statement of intent of about 1,000 words. And that letter of intent should do a few things. It should outline your reasons for pursuing an MHSc in bioethics. It should give us insight into how your academic or professional experiences prepares you for graduate education in bioethics. Ideally, it will identify your main areas of professional or scholarly interest in bioethics, and then describe how you plan, or how you aspire to be able to put your degree into practice in your career or in your institutional setting. So it's really an opportunity to bring voice to your curriculum vitae, and also to help us start to get to know you as a person. We also ask that if you are currently employed, that you provide a letter, that a letter is provided by a senior administrator, could be the person that you report to, on institutional letterhead, confirming that you will have the necessary release time to complete the degree, and clarifying, if possible, the institution's view of how your graduate education will help strengthen bioethics capacity in your home institution. So what we want to make sure is that you've got the support to do a degree whilst you're also working. And so this is really important for your success, but also we hear from our learners too. It's also a way to put on the radar of the folks that you report to about your interest in bioethics, and it can kindle some interest to follow your your journey as well. For those of you who are not employed, there are folks who are working in the health field who are self-employed. We would ask that you provide a letter clarifying that for us, so that you've got a complete application, but it helps us to understand that you're a self-employed, for example, midwife. And so you don't have an employer to provide a letter, but you are saying that you're confirming that you will have sufficient time to complete the degree. And then finally, your application should include all of your academic transcripts, undergraduate degrees, graduate degrees, degrees in progress, whatever they may be. And just so that you're aware, at the application stage, electronic versions of your transcript are permissible. You can attach them to the application, online application. And if you are offered admission and you accept that offer, then in order to confirm your admission, your institution would need to provide official transcripts. So at the application phase, unofficial ones uploaded into the online application system, but at the point of confirmation of admission, then we would need institutional official ones from your institutions. So maybe just say a little bit about this year's class. They were a great group. I am so blessed, and our faculty are so blessed with these wonderful group of people of 16 learners from 5 Canadian provinces across 4 different time zones, so just across space and time, with professional training in over nine health and health-related professions. They have professional work experience, in 12 different health settings, some of them in more than one type of health setting. So they're bringing all of that rich insight into the classroom. And some have worked not only in a Canadian health context, but have worked in other countries as well. So, a really rich meeting of minds and experiences with this cohort. So hoping some of you will join us to become class of 2027. Our graduates are around the globe. Just over the last little while, Terry and I have been tracking down all of our alumni over the duration of the degree's existence, and they are leading bioethics programs within their university, or they're leading it within their hospital, or they're working in professional bodies in a variety of different places. And you can see this is a bit of a snapshot of where some of our graduates are working today. And what are they doing? Today, our graduates are applying their bioethics knowledge and skill in a diversity of ways in their clinical work, for sure, in leadership, expert and policy and academic roles in health institutions or professional associations, research institutes, government agencies and universities across Canada and the globe. Some of our graduates have actually gone on to do advanced professional training, taking it another step to do a fellowship in clinical bioethics, and are now practicing as healthcare ethicists in a hospital or other health institution. So this is a bit of a snapshot of some of the types of roles and the types of settings where our graduates are actually putting their bioethics work into practice. So if you need to reach us, here is how you can do so. So Terry can be reached at jcb.education@utoronto.ca. I can be reached there at jennifer.gibson@utoronto.ca. You're welcome to go use the QR code on the screen here, which will take you to our MHSc program webpage. But if you don't have your phone with you to be able to take that QR code, not to worry. Here is the website, and I'll ask Terry if he might be able to at some point during the Q&A session to pop the MHSc program website into the chat so it's easily accessible to you. Okay. Just a reminder, deadline coming up, January 17th. Now, it's number 2 for questions. So if some of you may have arrived a little bit late, we are recording today's session, and it'll be posted on the MHSc Program and Bioethics page. But I want to reassure you, the posting will only capture my slides, my visual image, and my and Terry's voices. We ask that you please put your questions into the chat, and I will stop sharing screen. Terry will be monitoring the chat and will read out your question, but will not identify you by name. And because you'll be writing in the chat will also not be made available. The chat discussion will be kept will not be publicly available. It will only be, as I said, my slides, the visual, and Terry's and my voices in responding to your questions. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing screen and invite you to invite your questions. And Terry, over to you.
Thanks, Jen. We already have a first question. Thank you for the presentation. Are the referee required to complete the online reference process by the 17th of January, or do we simply need to indicate our referee by 17th, and they will be contacted later on?
So At the time that you put their names into the application system, your referees will receive a request. Ideally, the reference letters would be completed by the 17th. But Terry, could you provide some commentary on that? Because we sometimes have found that sometimes tracking down a referee who happens to be on sabbatical could create a little bit of a delay. But the reason why we do want the references is because as we review all the applications, we're looking, that is a really important part of the application. And so when the application review committee is looking at this, it's a gap if we don't have all of your references. So Terry, could you just comment on that from if not the 17th?
For sure. Yeah, like I mean like the idea is actually the better we actually have everything by the 17th, then the earlier for the committee to review everything and give you guys
That's
back an
right.
answer. The problem is actually like we can definitely contact the references beyond the date, but it's just that it delays the process, then it actually kind of delay the whole admission cycle as well. So we'll just say as early as possible.
Yes, thanks, Terry. And that's where too, if you're running into a situation where you're having a hard time tracking down that reference, or your referee says, "Look, I won't be able to get to it to the first week of February," send Terry a note. We will make note of that, and we'll know that we'll be receiving it a little bit later. Okay, so let us problem solve some of those kind of tricky connecting with folks you haven't spoken to in a while types of reference challenges.
Next question. You mentioned a fellowship. If I want to work as a clinical ethicist, do I need additional education beyond the degree? And also, are there time and schedule online components for that?
So there are across Canada and in other countries a number of fellowship programs. In Toronto, for example, the Centre for Clinical Ethics has a 2-year fellowship. The University Health Network, which is one of our large academic health science centers, has a 1-year clinical ethics fellowship. And so there are fellowships around. What I would caution you is that the practice of clinical ethics is a skill in itself. And so we do find that the field actually recommends that you do advanced training to do that. Um, the there are, though, examples of particularly people who are already very actively clinically engaged and there already is an ethics program, like a bioethics department within their hospital, for example. They may be more sort of seamlessly integrated into that bioethics department without following through with the fellowship. But this would be something that you may want to flag in a letter of intent, that this is kind of a milestone towards your a career aspiration to be working as a clinical ethicist, for example. Or I'm a health policy ethicist, maybe it's in a health policy ethics type of capacity. So that we're aware of that. But the program is primarily designed to support professionals to really think about how I can bring bioethics into my current role, which for some folks means training of the next generation of clinicians. So sort of training, so bringing sort of a lens around education training of the next generation. Or it could be bringing bioethics into my work as a clinician scientist, or bringing bioethics into my professional work with my professional regulatory body, or bringing it into my day-to-day. And so it's really supporting the competency development of people who are or bringing this into their professional work. But again, happy to have a conversation about aspirations. And it's also, as I said, very helpful you to signal where you'd like to go in the end with this work. It gives us a good sense of the mix in the cohort as well. So that's helpful information for us.
On to the next question, which is actually always on our FAQ. So, being a mature student who graduated over 14 years ago, I'm having a hard time securing academic reference. How crucial it is for me to have one? And also,
Mhm.
will negative impact my application if I don't have one?
So maybe what would be helpful, and thank you for the question. I mean, Yeah, this does happen for sure. I mean, you do your university training, you go out into the world, and you've had very little contact with your former professors. That's not surprising. So what we're really aiming for with an academic reference is to have insight into the likelihood that you will be successful in a graduate program. So sometimes that may be somebody who can really speak to your academic skill set that is not former professor, right? It could be somebody like if you happen to be engaged in some way in research right now, or in some types of teaching within your own profession, a colleague who has observed you in those settings might be able to provide a comment on the likelihood that you would be successful in a graduate program. It might also be somebody who also has had a professional degree that is a colleague who could say, yeah, you know what, I've been watching you and I've been encouraging you to do this graduate degree because I think you're going to be successful. So somebody can really who really could speak to that, who may not actually be a former professor. So you don't need to always dig back that direction. Um, so, this is something that Terry and I often play a bit of a sounding board about to help clarify who would be appropriate references in a case exactly like yours. It's been a long time since I've been in touch with these folks, and we'll sort of help you think it through. The other thing I'll mention as well is there may be an inclination from some applicants to provide more than 3 references. Don't do that. Just keep it at 3. Having more isn't better. And the reason for that is that the references, we don't know which references are really important to you. So we will typically we will only read the first 3 references that come in. And because the references come in on the schedule of by the deadline probably, but also on the schedule of the referees themselves, you may not end up with your first 3 references may not be the ones that are the strongest ones that can really speak to you to give some context about who you are and your fit with a program like this, or fit with bioethics, or your interest in bioethics, or your professional skills that you've got, or your likelihood of being successful in an academic setting. So keep it to 3. And there is no advantage to having more than 3. And in fact, it could be a liability.
Okay. Next question, which is actually both of them are actually kind of program related. The first one would be, how many seats are usually available in this program during admissions?
So because we're really committed to a cohort, we are looking at 15 to 20 students is sort of ideal. Anything that moves beyond that, I know that we could conceivably nudge this up to 30 students at some point in the future, but we start to lose some of that intimacy of the cohort experience. So yeah, so about 15 to 20 would be would be really our sweet spot.
The next part is, what's the typical weekly course schedule like? Are they concentrated over a couple of days or are they throughout the week?
So I'll tell you what we're doing this year. We've got, so in the first semester, students take 3 required courses, and just to give you a flavor of what they are, one is Theoretical Foundations of Bioethics, Part 1. They take Part 2 in the winter. There's a course on law and bioethics, and then there's one on empirical approaches to bioethics. And the way I like to think about this is like the 3 legs of a stool. So we've got empirical, we've got law, and then we've got philosophy, philosophical theory to support the seat of the stool. And so the way that we have so the courses right now are scheduled in the mornings, or early in the morning for folks in British Columbia, and later in the morning folks in Nova Scotia, for 2 hours on Tuesday and Thursday. And then there's 3 courses, so it's every couple of weeks. Each course is held every couple of weeks. So what we've tried to do is to distribute the load a bit so that there are only 2 courses in one week and one the next one, so that there's breathing space to just sort of to keep on top of things as well. The other thing that I'll mention too is that we're really trying to bring into this, like when you convene together as a group, it's why are we coming together? Well, we're coming together synchronously online with each other because we're going to pool our insights. We're going to share some learning. We're going to engage with each other. And so we're really, that's why it's not an asynchronous online program. What we've been hearing is just listening to our graduates, how important that connecting with others is. That's why we've got it, that's why it is synchronous. But yeah, it used to be everybody would cram in two 4-hour classes on a Thursday, followed by two 4-hour classes on a Friday. And so there's a lot of fatigue that comes with that. And with that fatigue too, especially in an online environment too, we're really mindful too that a lengthy class online is very tiring. We can't sustain, human beings can't really sustain that level of concentration. So we keep our class times from to 2 to 2.5 hours on the outside, and with maximal interactivity as much as possible.
Great. Not a typical question, but do apply. If I have a graduate degree, do you still require last year of an undergraduate transcript for application minimum?
Yeah, that's a University of Toronto requirement, and in fact, I think it's pretty common across graduate programs in other universities. And so, yeah, you would need to provide that. But let me just provide a couple of comments on that. Um, so we appreciate that when we look at this, the minimum we're saying B plus in the last year of your undergraduate degree, that gives us a signal about your likelihood of being successful in a graduate program. But if you have an undergraduate degree and you share that transcript with us, it tells us a lot of stories. It's like what your interests are, like what some of the courses that you were interested in. It is part of your story. But then you went on to do a graduate degree. The combination of the undergraduate and your graduate degree tells us, yeah, they're pretty good signal here that they will be successful in a graduate program. They've already done a graduate degree. So we do need both though. So when we talk about transcripts, we mean all of your transcripts. If you have 2 undergraduate degrees, all of your undergraduate degrees. If you have a master's degree, then it's the undergraduate degrees and your master's degree. So it's all of that package. It's your academic history, basically, after high school, basically, that we require.
One of the common questions that also being raised up for the new program too is actually what happened if we can made it to the residency week during the fall or the spring term?
That's, yeah, I mean, that's unfortunate if you can't. And it's not just simply the sort of situation where we could just sort of open up a Zoom link and everybody just joins in that way, because the type of learning we're doing during that week often doesn't really is not well suited to an online environment. So we're really mindful of, like, when we're coming together in person, what is it that we're doing there that is unique that we can't do as well online, and vice versa. So fortunately, all of our learners this year have been able to work with their institutions to be able to spend the week in 5 days in Toronto in each of those semesters. That's why institutional support's really important. And so we are not at this time at not at this time permitting remote participation in those residency weeks.
Great, thank you, Jen. I'm just also answering questions that also came in that if they're actually possible. Um, so let me just go through that. So there's actually a question that asks about tuition and fees, which I provided some links on there. People who actually want to look at that, they can actually go through with that.
Perfect.
Um, this one is actually a good question. If I'm actually curious to learn more about potential elective courses for the program, is it possible to take courses that's outside of the School of Public Health?
If they're ethics related, yes. And if you can fit it into your schedule. So although our program, the MHSc program in bioethics, is designed intentionally as a hybrid program with both online and in-person components, not all courses outside of the Dalla Lana School, or even indeed in the Dalla Lana School, are delivered online. So that could be a factor. But I think that if there was an area you became aware of a course that was right on point for the development that you wanted to do. It fit within your schedule in sort of the from May, fall, or winter, your second year, then that would be a conversation you and I would have. Right. So we'd say, oh, is this a good fit? We could investigate a little bit further. But we also will have a set of recommended electives, some of which over which the program has control. So there are MHSc electives that we can format in a way that allows for a hybrid delivery. There are other courses that we may recommend that if you happen to live in the Toronto area or Southern Ontario and able to come in, but are only held in person, then we would let you know that as well. So it may be a barrier for some folks if it's not one of our MHSC electives. But that's a great question, and so I think we would take that on a case-by-case basis. Thank you.
Some people asked me about transcript, which I answered it directly
Okay.
onto the chat, so that should be fine.
Terry, is it worth mentioning generally to folks because not everybody will necessarily be following the chat?
For sure, yeah. So the general question was asking if the idea of what is an official transcript. So I kind of reiterate saying that in the process of application, applicants should just submit an online transcript that you can find from your university. And then upon the admission of your general acceptance for the program, the graduate office will require an actual official transcript to be mailed to us directly through sealed envelope. So just to want to confirm on that one.
Yeah. And so like the difference between official and unofficial is that many universities now have are moving toward making digital versions of transcripts downloadable by students. So I can download my transcript from the universities where I took my degrees, and then it's that downloaded one, which is unofficial, right? So, and in fact, they normally are marked unofficial. But the official one is one that you don't touch at all. This is something that comes directly from your institution. It's University A sends it directly to University of Toronto. It's got a stamp on it. It's sealed. Like it's not either provisional or unofficial in that respect. So that is a step. That's one step further. This is some of the once admitted into the program, then the graduate office within the Dalalana School will give you instructions about what the expectations are for you to arrange for an official transcript.
Great. Um, this one is actually a little bit tricky, so I'll actually mention it. Does the online and the residency week setting means that the program isn't exactly oriented for the international students who need the full-time settings? Now, consider how student visas usually are asked to provide a full-time on-campus time or provide evidence that our accommodation are inside or near the institutions.
Interesting.
We might have to follow up with this one,
We
right?
will have to follow up on that.
Okay,
Thank you
so I'll
so
get
much
back
for
to the
that, because there's some
individuals.
experience in our school about this. Because we also within our school we have a doctorate, a DRPH, a Doctor of Public Health, and almost all of those students. It's a very similar program model. A lot of those students come from outside of Canada and are here on a visa, and they've been able to secure that study permit. So we will investigate and be able to follow up. I think Terry, you've identified who the person asking the question is, and we'll follow up with you with the information you're asking.
For sure. Um, what's the average weekly time commitment for reading an assignment, would you say?
Yeah, so it's going to peak and trough a little bit. So right now, I think our learners are spending a lot of time wrapping up final assignments for their three courses. So it's a little bit, weekends are a little bit more subscribed right now than probably they are normally. But normally we would say about 15 to 20 hours, including sort of reading or watching the video or listening to the podcast that may be assigned. the in-class component, the online component of it. And but one of the things we're trying to be very mindful of is making sure that any preparation is meaningful. So if there are going to be a couple of readings, why these readings? And giving you as the learner some insight into what it is you're supposed to be focusing your attention on. So we know how busy you are. In fact, most of our faculty are equally busy working within the health sector as well. So we're very, very mindful of that. So as much as possible, we're trying to introduce ways to provide you with guidance about how to make that preparation really work for you and to not feel overburdened. I've just had one-on-one check-ins with each one of our current students and just finding out how things are going. And they said it was just like a little bit of training wheels in the first couple of months to figure out how to make professional and personal life and academic life work, but they've settled into a groove now. So that should provide you with a little bit of reassurance. The other thing I've noticed too amongst the cohort is that often they support each other, and so it's almost like a very large study group in certain ways, but they often provide each other with mentorship and advice about how to find that balance. And so all this to say, it'll probably feel a little bit like, oh my goodness, at the beginning, but our students are actually really settling into a really nice pattern. Yeah.
Somewhat related to that, and I would actually kind of mention it as like international kind of thing. So what happened if, say, the time commitment for the classes don't drive with how I function? Say, for example, my full-time work setting, or if I'm actually overseeing another country that does not align. Say, for
Yeah.
example, if it's the middle of the night, then what should I do?
Yeah, it's challenging. Oh my goodness, even in Canada, we're trying to find a sweet spot in terms of time across time zones. One of the things that I do is I do some work with World Health Organization, and it's somebody's morning and somebody's evening and somebody's afternoon. I don't have any I don't have a magic solution for that yet, but a couple of things. One is that we're really learning from the experience. I mentioned the Doctor of Public Health program, similar sorts of challenge, and they've been learning alongside us to think about how do we really support international learners in the online setting in that particular way. We have, in some cases where, in fact, we just had a situation where somebody was called away, couldn't even attend class because they were delivering a baby. I mean, the baby wasn't going to wait, right? So we have many of our classes, actually, the faculty will record the session. It's nothing like, it's kind of the backup if you're unable to be there. So we're trying to find good ways to optimize people's participation as much as possible, appreciating that you don't always have a ton of control over your environment on a particular day, especially if you're clinically engaged. But then in addition, also being mindful too about time zones. So certainly looking at the cohort, we would sort of take each cohort, it's as unique, and say, well, goodness, if we're dealing with a 12-hour time zone, a 12-hour difference, then we need to factor that into thinking about when it would be best to really increase the chances that regardless of where you are, over space and time, that you would be able to participate as actively as possible. So one year may look a little different than the next year because of the nature, the composition of the cohort of that year.
Okay. Can you also provide some example of what the current and former student have done for the practicum experience and capstone projects?
Okay, and I'm just also mindful too that we're running a little over time, so maybe we'll leave this as the last question for today, and then also Terry, if you wouldn't mind putting the contact information into the chat so that folks can follow up with us if they have further questions. So we just had one of our students won a capstone project award. There's an award for the best capstone project as judged by their professional by the faculty members of the capstone course. And she was focusing on advanced care planning in the context of oncology. And so developing tools and resources to support in her particular context. Sometimes students have actually undertaken a research project if they actually have research, a background in research. And so they have to deploy that towards a particular research question in applied bioethics. Some have actually conducted an ethics needs assessment in their institution. Some have actually been engaged in a policy project. So developing a policy, so actually going through all the steps of developing a rigorous, well-informed, and a highly engaged policy development process to generate a policy that may be of interest. Others have been thinking about, gosh, how can I translate some of my knowledge into an educational module for my colleagues or my team or my institution? So developing a curriculum and receiving mentorship for that. So it really, one of the reasons why I was meeting one-on-one with students this just a few weeks ago was to get a sense of how they were thinking about how they would like to begin translating their bioethics knowledge into practice, what kind of observational learning they may be interested to do, in what types of setting, like they being aware of what their gaps are. And we're going through a process right now, starting to try thinking about what would be a good match, who might be a good mentor for the student. And if they don't already have some ideas, it's really just like your question, it's bouncing around. So where do you want to go? And then let's work backwards and let's see how we can make the practicum and the capstone project work for you in your own professional development. And hence that's one reason why the projects are really diverse and they really tell the story of the individual in the cohort, and the practicum experiences may be diverse as well. Depending on the observational learning that the learner would like to engage in.
Great. I think we actually captured all of the question at this point, Jen.
Wonderful. Wow. Thank you for your great questions. Okay, so I think we'll leave it there. Thank you all for coming. I know that some of you were joining us at different times of the day. We are 5 o'clock here in Toronto, and I know that some of you, it was your evening, your nighttime, or your morning. So thank you so much for making the time. Thank you for your questions and your interest in the program. And by all means, if you have, if anything comes up after today that you'd like to sort of bounce off us, please do follow up on the contact information. As I mentioned, this recording will be posted on the MHSc program page of the Joint Center for Bioethics website. We're gonna edit it so that it is, again, as I promised, my slides, Terry's and my visual, and our voices. And so with that, I'll say thank you all, and we look forward to receiving your applications.